down 72 seconds then to remember those.
Sorry to interrupt you. I've been fitting with the blood pressure monitor that has a tendency to go off. It's just gone off now, so I just apologise if there is any disturbance.
I'm sitting in the wrong place.
Okay. Thank you. So we will ignore your blood pressure monitor.
Thank you.
But can we now think about the 72 second silence to remember those who lost their lives? And please, could you just check your phones or computers? Thank you very much. Will you please now remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy?
Armchair.
Did anybody hear any apologies for absence?
Yes.
Catherine. Ah, Catherine. Sorry. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Pope for absence. And are there any declarations of interest? Our minutes of the previous meeting, can I please sign them as true and accurate record? Agree. Thank you. Okay, let's go to the first item on the agenda. It's agenda item 4, BCS Development and Investment Programme. Who is going to introduce it? Josh?
I will introduce Anna as coming as well as public health. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, leadership team. So really pleased to introduce the report alongside with Councillor Addenbrooke and myself. The public health team and the community team have done a great job in looking at ways we can have better public health interventions in the community, especially those in the most deprived parts of our borough. And what we're proposing this evening is a kind of a new three-pronged approach, kind of outside of the box situation than what we've done before. And that is to establish a healthy community network, work with the voluntary sector for a training program, and then a supply grant of about £2.35 million over the next 3 years in order to try and improve the lives of many of our residents here as well. As I said, this is a new approach, and I really hope that we'd all support this evening.
So is it kind of on the community champions model? Is that the idea, or is it completely separate?
It's completely separate.
But the same type of people who are in the voluntary sector who will go knocking on doors, or not?
So this is to work on a different way with our voluntary and community sector organisations to reach people who've got a ways to gain from accessing health and wellbeing services. So what we're hoping to do is to deliver public health interventions through voluntary and community sector organisations which are closer to our local residents.
No, I get that, but the people who the voluntary sector are employing, I assume they're employing, will be local residents. So kind of the same as the community champion thing, or completely different types of people.
So not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, and community champions are volunteers, and through this program, the people that the voluntary sector will usually employ, they probably will already be staff members of that organization, or they will be employing someone who will be put through dedicated public health enhanced training, so that there's a level of intervention that the community champions will provide, which is more awareness raising and promotion.
Right.
And these people will be delivering health
Okay. So one's awareness raising, the other is actual intervention. Got you. Thank you.
Yeah, just expanding on your point, do you want to just outline the sort of things that you might be targeting? As an example,
So things that, sorry,
the sort of areas that you would be considering to target.
absolutely. So this is a people and place-based approach. People who have the most to gain based on what we know of what are the key causes of mortality, such as lung cancers, COPD, hypertension, and stroke. The kind of cohorts who have poor health outcomes already, such as from our data, we suggest that Black Caribbean, Bangladeshi, and Asian communities are more likely to experience poorer health outcomes than other communities. And then in the areas where we know that there are residents with deprivation and long-term health conditions, which is not surprisingly the same wards that we continue to come back to, Nottingdale, Goulburn, Dalgarno, and Chelsea Riverside. So we would be sort of making sure that we work with key BCS partners who have evidence in working in those areas, who already have reached into those communities and have trained them up into like dedicated interventions to target these key cases of mortality, but also focus on prevention, such as smoking cessation, sexual health, integrated healthy lifestyle services, mental health, and
Some of those people who the voluntary sector are already there, it's just taking it to another level. That sounds really sensible, actually.
And so I think on that point, I think the timing is really important because we're seeing the NHS cutting back. I think they've withdrawn most of their funding from the voluntary sector. So using these groups who are trusted by the voluntary sector, we're going to be able to reach people that the NHS and the council can't reach. So I think it's really important.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Emma.
I know I'm a bit of a broken record on this, but vaccination and dentistry, particularly dentistry in children, a huge problem as far as that. Yes, that articulated thing.
So what we've
Yes, I
included.
found it. I found it in the chart.
Yeah.
We've also included our borough stories and basically the DSLA data that we're drawing on as part of this. But oral health, as you know, is an area that we want to make significant improvements on, and an area we're looking in a lot of detail, not just with the voluntary sector organisations, but also in terms of our health visiting service. We're about to recommission our school nursing service, so we're taking much more of a whole systems approach around oral health, and now the added benefit of being able to engage voluntary sector in supporting that approach within communities.
And I would say, that this is kind of the starting gun approach. So, this is just the very first step of the program. So when the program does develop in consultation with Sarah and I, especially looking at some of the BCS obligations, we'll be looking at different interventions that Anna and the team will recommend on the basis of that way forward.
Yeah, I was just going to say about, I'm just looking at Startwell, nearly 1 in 5 5-year-olds have decayed teeth.
Yes.
That's something you could, and then it's over 1 in 6 have mental health. Now, I'm not saying that isn't important, but it's very hard to measure improvements in health, mental health, and sometimes environmental. Whereas, children with rotten teeth, that's quite easy to.
And it's the most common cause of being fitted to aging as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and invasive.
Josh.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. Tom.
Well, just a general kind of overview. It's 2.3 million for the next 3 years. How sure are you that that's going to be actually have a decent impact and not just going to be swallowed up in administration?
So there's a legacy to this project, which I think makes us confident about the impact. So this is about a co-production approach with the voluntary sector over a 3-year period. And then at the end of that period, we'll have built skills and capacity in the voluntary sector to enable them to continue to work alongside us, perhaps in a commissioning arrangement as a part of our healthy lifestyle services. We are looking at measuring quite tangible outcomes as a part of this project. So basically, those groups that Muskan mentioned, those places that Muskan mentioned, we'll be looking at referrals into services, we'll be looking at people completing programmes within services, and we'll be monitoring the actual outcomes and whether or not we're impacting on those outcomes. So there'll be a dashboard that sits around this, a very practical indicators that will enable us to see that impact, and we're very keen to go back to scrutiny after the project a little bit further down the road to continue that conversation with scrutiny.
It's reassuring. Thank you.
And I just want to say something that scrutiny did go through this in great detail at the last select committee. So we have had that extra eye on it as well. I did offer some thoughts on that too, and Pascal did a great presentation as well, especially on I don't really want to expand that, about the health inequality, especially different people from different communities who may not be necessarily in a position to trust council or traditional NHS routes, perhaps certainly able to do that. I think you summed that up really well, and I think if you want to do that again for the team here,
Yeah,
that'd be
at
great.
the scrutiny committee last week, there were questions around, like you really mentioned oral health, there were questions about the cancer screening rates in the community, particularly with some communities who we feel that, are not sort of taking up the screenings, even if the offer is widely available. So we did say that we come with the realm of community insight and we can understand the cultural ramifications of things such as cervical screening or breast screening may bring to some certain women in the community. And instead of someone with a lanyard with a council or NHS saying that you need to get it done every 5 years, that's really not going to tackle this issue, even if we have screening happening in every community area. It's about the trust and the relationship and sort of really understanding, in addition to practical barriers to access, there's cultural barriers to access, there's historical learning, there is lots of, learned behaviors that people come with. So the voluntary community sector who look like them, who are familiar, who understand the context, might be better able to sort of utilize that message, especially with the training that we are providing, and also with the Healthy Communities Network to help them share the best practice across to the team as well. So that was just one example, but also sort of understanding if we really look at the voluntary and community sector in the borough, we have over 600 community organizations. And it's a massive asset, but it's just really about utilizing it to its maximum effectiveness. So giving some examples through the data that we have over here and through the appendices that we go through as well. There are certain communities, for example, the Moroccan community, there are individuals with complex mental health needs who would need that additional targeted support. So if we sort of just hypothetically look at the VCS, like the Al Hassaniya Center in the north of the borough, Smart in the south of the borough, and how do we sort of really mobilize those networks, those relationships and trust through training, through sort of networking opportunities, and then also providing them with the grounds to start delivering those services into those areas and in those locations. So that's our approach to taking it forward.
I like one thing that's terrific, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know what the rest of the leadership team think, but actually before I toss Mary, if you have any comments.
No, I mean, the OSC endorsed the approach and there were lots of questions. I mean, obviously it's a really difficult problem to tackle. So, but I think the amount of discussion of it reflected the importance that the committee attaches to addressing these health inequalities, but endorsed the approach that's been taken.
And just to highlight that, I think after Grantham, one of the lessons learned was about community commissioning. And I appreciate this is not commissioning, but it may lead to commissioning. And I think it's a really good approach.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Certainly have my support. And everyone else happy with the recommendations in paragraph 2?
Yes.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Oscar. Thank you very much. Right. The next item, agenda A5, is about agreeing approach and payment to over 16,500 billion consortium from Chelsea. Julian?
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to start with a big thank you to the officers that worked on this report, Joe, Lisa, Hannah, and others. I wanted first to reflect on some of the work we've already done to address the rising cost of living, because I think this obviously is the most recent thing that we're doing, but there's been a lot that's come before that. When inflation started to rise most quickly, the council moved at pace to set aside £8 million in our cost of living fund to help local people. And with that money, we've already done a lot. We did a £100 cost of living rebate last year for households in bands A to D. We've invested in things like employment support, and I know that we've worked with the voluntary sector providing support for them as well. We've also worked with government distributing the household support fund, which has gone towards things like school lunches and non-financial health, like cost of living hubs, warm spaces, and signposting to advice agencies. So I think this really isn't the start of our work to address the rising cost of living, and nor will it be the end, but it's a staging post on that journey as we hope that the pressures ease. It also sits alongside some of the long-standing work that we've done as a council, including our £14 million every year of council tax relief, which is one of London's most generous relief schemes, and the more than £20 million that we give to the voluntary sector every year. I think it's also important to note that addressing the cost of living is key to the current council plan in terms of delivering a fairer borough. I think the reason we're doing this is that although many households in Kensington and Chelsea are well off, some are not. And by one metric, we know that, for example, median weekly household earnings fell by 16%, from £977 to £813 in the borough last year. Behind every statistic is a story, or in this case, around 150,000 stories across the borough. So the cost of living challenge is a nuanced one and one that demands thoughtful engagement, and I'm grateful to officers for the work they've done on that. And it's why we're resolving, hopefully tonight, to provide a second rebate for a more targeted cohort. Tonight we'll be voting on a £100 rebate to 16,500 households who receive council tax relief, housing benefit and universal credit, and maps, I think, quite well onto the highest need that we can identify across the borough. Many households in this group are going to be finding things tough. And whilst this won't necessarily solve the problem in one go, my goodness, it will help a lot of them. And I should add, whilst I'm proud that we're doing more than just about hopefully anywhere else in the city to tackle the cost of living, I'm not aware of a similar rebate coming with the council tax bill anywhere else in the capital. I'm in equal parts happy and somewhat taken aback by the response rate. It's clearly a good thing that 1,400 people responded to the consultation, nearly about 97% of whom support the package. But it is also a stark reminder of how keenly the pressures are being felt, that so many residents took time out of their day to give us their view. So to all of those people, I want to say a big thank you. This paper is about serving your needs. And I know that we all in this room will continue to do everything that we can to mitigate the rising cost of living. And I hope that colleagues will vote with me to pass the recommendations.
Well
Question, Josh.
Thank you. And thank you, Johnny. Absolutely fantastic that we're doing this. I mean, one thing that's surprising is the breakdown of the wards and those on lower income households, which when you read, it's really, really stark. For example, 44% of low income households, it will make a really, really great difference to their people's lives. One of the questions I have is that how are we getting the funding or the rebate back to these residents? And how are we saying that, you know, the council has done your side, we really do care about your situation? We know the council can make huge impact rather than perhaps some people not knowing it's happened or anything on their part.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Indall. And that was an issue also raised by the Energy and Scrutiny Committee, who gave some kind of helpful challenge around how we make sure we communicated it properly. So the payments will be automatic in that we think about 2/3 of cases where we have people's bank details, and so we can make that payment to them directly, and we can obviously write to them to let them know that we've done that. In the remainder of their cases, it will be about contacting them and encouraging them to take it up. We're actually having a conversation later this week with some of our voluntary community sector partners to talk about how we make sure we get the message out so that anybody eligible for the payment who won't get an automatic payment is encouraged to apply. And that's why you'll see in the implementation of timescales at 6.9, we've left a little bit of time to roll this out so you can create that window where people can come forward. I also think it's worth saying that alongside talking about the council being on people's side, alongside rolling out this scheme, I think it is a really good opportunity going out with the council tax bill to remind people of the other support that's available.
Yes.
And that includes Councillor Albanese mentioned the council tax reduction scheme, but there is also a much wider landscape of support out there for households on low incomes, and actually some of the VCS groups are working together to pull together the latest on that from their perspective so that we can share some of those schemes with people so that people have access to the full range of supports available.
Emma and then Jen.
So thanks to all for this. This is great. I think my only observation would be, we know this is quite a blunt, it's hard to identify those people, and yes, it's great that you're doing it, but I think you need to be a little bit careful not to go with philanthropics too much about it, just because it's that balance between it's great that we're doing it and awesome, and as you say, actually maybe it's also that flagging of all the other things we're doing, because we know it's a complex picture, and these are very council tax figures. They're very, very blunt tools to identify people most in need. And of course, poverty comes in lots of different things as well, not just about money, but that's very important too.
I suppose we would look for appreciating that it was a very complex picture. I suppose this paper is saying to us, well, even though that is the case, we need to have quite a simple way of administering it so we can actually get it out. I suppose that's the balance, isn't it?
Absolutely, but acknowledge that we're not reaching everyone
No,
and,
no,
you know, and it's the best we can do, but we'll try. It's not valedictory.
It's just worth saying on that point, I think that this is a more targeted scheme than the one that we
We
considered
did
last
previously,
year.
Yeah,
actually.
you're finding it.
But I think it's also, it is potentially also a way of looking at some of the patterns of deprivation, which Councillor Rendell, you mentioned, thinking back to the last paper,
Exactly.
the decision we just made. So I think it needs to be part of a broader,
Exactly.
at the start of a broader approach to look at patterns of deprivation and to look at how we target some of our initiatives even more carefully using whatever proxies we have, but also learning from that work to see who we might be missing and might not be.
Jem?
Mine was really just a bit of learning for myself, to be honest, because as Councillor Ballasy mentioned, we obviously have 14 million a year of council tax reduction, and you've rightly identified other people that don't quite meet that, but meet some of the other thresholds that we're setting. But just really for my own knowledge is what qualifies to get the full 100% council tax reduction, and can we make sure that if anyone that's just slipping outside perhaps would qualify but need education on their situation, or is it just handled externally?
So yeah, I have to confess ignorance on the exact parameters of the scheme. What is true of the council tax scheme is that it's quite finely calibrated, so you can go from getting quite a small amount of support to getting 100% of your council tax covered. And regardless of the amount of support you receive, you will get this payment. So as it were, even for working families who have some council tax relief, not 100%, they will receive this payment. There is a separate problem, I gather, with certain people on certain benefits not necessarily not accessing your the full council tax relief, and that's where I think that additional campaign will really help. But we can certainly get you some more detailed answers on the
Get what they qualify for.
Exactly. And I mean, a very small number of people choose not to access the support that's available, but actually I think we could do more to make sure we promote the scheme really widely, which is part of the plan for the next couple of months.
Mary, anything from the OSC?
Yeah, and I just think this is a really good example of a paper being brought early to OSC,
Yeah.
which huge thanks. And I think it gave the scrutiny committee, I mean, as Joe alluded to, a chance to really interrogate this. Because it is a very important paper and perhaps give some suggestions, but Joe stood a trial of 120 questions with huge aplomb and had an answer for everything. And I think that's reflected in the paper, and the committee endorsed the approach and particularly appreciated the attempt to be more targeted this year.
Okay, that basis, is everyone happy to accept the recommendations in paragraph 2? Yes, thank you. Can we go on to item 6, on page 101, which is the annual Treasury Management Strategy Statement?
That's okay, yeah. I mean, this is an annual report that goes with the budget suite of papers, and Bill, who's the Director of Treasury and Pensions, will introduce a few of the key points.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike. So to brief overview, paragraph 3 looks at the external context. The fact we're in a position at the moment of high interest rates, reasonably high inflation, having reduced that from double figures, now down to 4%, but still with a general risk that those interest rates could remain high for longer, depending on how well that battles might against inflation, and obviously with the geopolitical environment in which we find ourselves as well. Table 1 looks at the interest rate forecast, which is the official bank rate plus the general 50-year borrowing rates, which we benchmark against. You can see the central case 4.38, but reducing down to just above 4 over the next 2 years. Paragraph 4 looks at the capital programme for the next 3 years and the means of financing that, which is the bottom line of table 3. The debt figure, which is the external funding requirement, and the prudential indicators, which we're required to present, which shows no breaching or any instance of forecast breaching of those limits. Paragraph 5 looks at the borrowing strategy, and 5.10 you can see the approved sources of long-term, short-term borrowing, mainly in terms of RBKCs from the Public Works Loans Board lending facility. Moving on to paragraph 6, which looks at the annual investment strategy. It's a reduced balance of investments that gradually has reduced over the last couple of years. And there's a mainly vanilla approach to the investing, which is within money market funds and also the Royal London Gilt and Bond Fund, but with quite favourable yields shown at the moment. Finally, the rest of the report is technical material, which I'm happy to answer any questions, but Appendix 6 looks at the governance arrangements, in delegation, areas of responsibility. And then obviously at the start, we have the recommendations in paragraph 2. Thank you.
James. How long have we used Arling Close?
Sorry, say again.
How long have we used Arling Close?
They were appointed around 2 years ago, I think. Previously to their appointment, we didn't use an external advisor, but we've taken them on in the last 2 years.
May I, but perhaps not for this meeting, but be interested to know how much we paid them.
I think it's in the region of £30,000 a year. 30,000.
30.
Joe?
Could I just ask about table 6, so sort of gross borrowing? I feel like every year we discuss this, Mike, I learn a little bit more, but again, I'm a little bit thrown out by the somewhat stark variance between our gross debt and our requirement. And I'm sure there's a very simple explanation, but for a layperson, it appears as though we're not sort of getting through our, not acting on the elements that we put into our finance program at the outset.
Well,
quite a huge amount.
The bottom line is the capital financial requirement, CFR as it's known. That is the total means of external financing that's required to fund our capital program. And it's undertaken by usually by Public Works Loans Board borrowing. But obviously the gross debt, which we have at any one time, you can see that the line above, which is the line in bold, 23-24, 318.81. So obviously there's a stark difference between that and the capital balancing requirement, and that gap is filled by internal borrowing. So we have internal cash reserves, and we can make temporary use of those, which it saves us the effort of having to invest those on the cash market, and would save quite a bit of money in terms of the interest that we would normally pay on that debt.
And we have sufficient. I mean, that's still a very large number to fund internally. Presumably it's cumulative for the year.
Those figures are cumulative, and you can see that in terms of the current cash balance, which we're investing at around 80, so we will be required to go to external and there's the Public Works Loans Board for the borrowing over the next year.
It's a question for me. Thank you on that. Just where we hold some of our cash reserves, etc., and whatnot. Do we have any money in SVB? And if not, do we look at other banks and less ability to ensure that they're reasonable?
Yes, well, the monies are invested in money market funds, which is these are money AAA rated funds on the market, which covers a range of investments, but with very little risk. If we had a more substantial investment portfolio, we'd be looking to invest in banks.
I see. Right.
And other counterparties like local authorities. But the SVB has made the quality list that we could well. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
So within the headlines being so many councils being in trouble, are you confident that this strategy, we're not going to get into trouble then? You haven't got, as you said, it's all AAA, you've got, correct investments everywhere. Doing anything unusual?
No, we're not. No. I mean, the councils that have got into trouble are the ones really who have borrowed for investment to make returns to support their budget, which we haven't undertaken. So So no, there's none of that. We're well below the level that we're allowed to borrow.
So initiative, Mary, anything from you? What's really from me? Thank you very much. I won't read out all the recommendations, but are you all happy to approve it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we can move on to the revenue budget, capital program and council tax. So,
Peter, we're going to consider items.
was it before this one?
What's that? Yes, before.
I apologise. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Before we discuss this, could we please look at the additional paper, which is the housing revenue account budget setting report and business planning.
Agenda item 10 for this one.
Agenda item 10.
So it's in the main pack.
Sorry, right, not really having those tonight. Apologies. Can we please look at agenda item 10 first? Because what we need to do is to look at what the Review and Scrutiny Committee budget working group report has come up with. Yeah, and
Will is going to.
and Will is here. So Will, would you like to come up the table? I'm sorry to say. Because what we want is Will's comments to inform our deliberation of the budget.
Thank you. Even more than it already has.
And even more than it already has.
So what I wanted to say is essentially you, on the understanding that you've read this report.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through it in detail. I'd like to draw your attention in particular to the first recommendation. That transformation strategy needs to be in place by this March. The reason that we hold that view is it enables the transformations to be embedded in all departments, including the HRA, in time for the next budget cycle. Financial officers have been warning us for 2 years that 25-26 will require structural change, especially in the light of the best counsel objective. I hope you're able to accept all the recommendations in this paper. Scrutiny colleagues look forward to your response. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions on any particular ones of the recommendations. Recommendations are set out, and I would like also to say a big thank you to officers and colleagues. One little detail is that we managed to include a vast amount of work in 5 pages of report, 14 recommendations.
Masterpiece of pricing.
Well, no, it's all there for those geeks who are interested, because you just use the links and it will pop up. There's about 1,000 pages to keep it.
Well, I think the first thing we do is thank you and your working group, because honestly, you worked so hard. There are really detailed recommendations. We've obviously been through everything with a fine tooth comb, and I think that's very helpful for us. Having said that, they are very detailed, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to give you a immediate response tonight, but whether we could really acknowledge it and actually ask whether we could have provide you with a detailed response to each of them, and then confirm whether we are going to accept them or progress with the implementation to the scrutiny committees when it comes up. Is that all right? I just don't think we'll manage to go through.
I'm sure that there is suitably draconian statutory requirements for you to do that, but I won't spend that checking with necessary. I would like to add one other thing, is that the methodology this year has been to go with the budget working group into the scrutiny committees to discuss their area of expertise.
Yeah, that's fun.
And that did 2 things. First of all, they have knowledge of that area. And secondly, it was done in public. So every bit of examination here has been done in public.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And considering where we were a few years ago on the scrutiny of the budget, where we are now, I think it's night and day.
Right.
So thank you very much, and thank you for all the detail. I don't know if there are any questions or comments or anything that, within your budget areas you want to come back to, Will, or should we leave it when we accept the recommendations, and we'll provide a detailed response to each of them, and including confirmation whether they're accepted and what the progress would be if we have accepted them towards implementation, and go back to all the separate scrutiny committees. We agreed on that? Thank
Thank
you
you very much.
Very much. And I don't think there's anything else you want to add before we go into the main budget report. No, thank you.
Not at all, thank you.
Fantastic. And we now go backwards, please, to the main report, which is item 7 on page 129. Charlie, over to you.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to everybody in this room for all of the work that you've done putting together this budget. It's definitely a team effort, and in particular, Mike, Lisa, Liam, Amanda, and all of the other people in the resourcing directorate that hold the ring. I think since I last presented the budget at one of these meetings, a lot has changed in Kensington and Chelsea. Progress has been made on many projects all over the borough, including some of the parks improvements at Kensington Memorial, Holland Park and St Luke's. Blitzes have been in just about every ward over the past 12 months, tackling litter and antisocial behaviour. And new social homes have opened at Kelso Cochrane House, the first of 600 new homes, 300 of which will be social rent. I was going to say lots has changed at the town hall too, including not just the election of a new leader of the opposition in the Labour group, the third in 5 years, but also a transformation programme of their own on the opposition benches that has delivered a 33% reduction in headcount over the past 12 months, which is quite something. However, much is also the same. The rising cost of living driven by high inflation is still a big problem. And we've already talked tonight about how we are proposing to address the problem with the £100 rebate for households with receipt of council tax relief, housing benefit and universal credit. Homelessness is still affecting many lives and local government budgets too, as we've seen in some of our outturns, whilst uncertainty about long-term local government funding arrangements persists. It's against that backdrop that it's our responsibility to balance our budget and to stick to some of the commitments we've already made. We've committed to becoming the best for a borough that's greener, safer and fairer in the light of Grenfell. We're still committed to that mission. There are still plans, for example, to build a new park at Cremorne Wharf, which will be greener, to acquire Notting Hill Police Station, which will make us safer, and to build even more social homes, which is certainly about fairness. And I, like many in this room, attended the final day of Testimony Week recently, which was a privilege and also an experience that renews individual and shared purpose at the council to drive real change. We haven't changed fast enough since the tragedy in 2017, but I hope that this budget helps us to protect not only core services like our twice-weekly bin collections, but crucially helps us to address some of the inequalities that are still prevalent in the borough and that still require real action. I've been around the borough over the past year, talking to people. I've been to places like Silchester with Kim, to St Quintin's with Elizabeth, and I understand that for all of the people that we meet on these visits, it's actions and deeds, not words, that are going to count. That's part of why I intend to confine the rest of my remarks to new investment in the budget that shows how the council can drive real change and address some of the inequalities and fairness issues in the borough. And I can do so safe in the knowledge that the Overview and Scrutiny Working Group, ably chaired by Will, has already been through line by line of this budget, and likewise that lead members can highlight specific opportunities and risks. Starting with, as a Conservative local authority too, I think we strongly believe that a good education is vital to life chances for children. Almost all of our local schools are good or outstanding, as Ofsted sees it, which is fantastic. And we've delivered new schools too, like Kensington Queensmore, which I know Emma and others have worked for a long time on. It's not just education and facilities, however, that secure children's life chances, but also making sure that we have the right environment, cleaner air and a healthy place to live, work and learn. And so it's our duty to clean up and reduce emissions, especially in and around the school gates. That's why we launched a programme previously to make all council schools net zero. Phase 1, 8 schools are nearly complete, and I visited Thomas Jones with Councillor Boakes. Phase 2's match funding bid is already in and under consideration. And tonight in Appendix 13, you can see that there's £3.5 million of pipeline investment to help us get on site at every council-owned school over the next 12 months. That's also in paragraph 2720 of the main budget report. However, I think we must all understand ourselves that school is not the only barrier or schooling is not the only barrier to building a better life and increasing life chances. Local schools are some of London's best performing schools in many cases, but some children do not go on to earn as much or live as long, no matter their attainment at primary and secondary. One barrier among many to this is the cost of higher education. Tuition fees are very high, maintenance fees are for many prohibitive. Even those who take out loans are saddled with debt that structurally reduces their earnings in later life compared with peer groups. Money shouldn't be so great a barrier to the higher education that often unlocks the career that people want. And that's why we've included paragraph 8.10 in the budget report, which signals our intention to develop a scheme that reduces the burden for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds to study at university. I know that's something that Councillor Marshall, Councillor Will, others have brought to the table over the past year, and I'm pleased it's included. It's important that as many local pupils as possible can access opportunities and make the most of their lives, and ideally hope that this is a germ with more detail coming over the coming months that can make a difference for somebody. But with all the best intentions, be it schooling, university or vocational routes, some families fall on hard times through no fault of their own. Times are tough, and as we've discussed, so too are the cost of living pressures. And that's why we've included the proposal to provide a cost of living rebate, which we talked about, the £100 for 16,500 households across KNC. This money may not sound like a lot to some audiences, and I'd certainly love to do even more, but it will be a vital lifeline for a great many right across Kensington and Chelsea. Last but not least, before we go to others, I want to talk a little bit about adult social care. Uncertain grants mean that it's difficult to make long-term plans in that department and right across the council, I should say. However, how a society treats its most vulnerable is always the mark of its humanity. This is a competent and a caring council, and so I'm proud that not only are we pressing ahead with plans to deliver older care housing at Lotts Road, which is the biggest council site in partnership with the development agreement signatories at Mount Anvil, but also, as we can see in Appendix 13, we have now put £10 million of new funding into the capital pipeline, despite all of the pressures that you will see manifest in the report, to start work on 2 new facilities for residents with learning disabilities in North Kensington. These 4 initiatives are only an illustration of how at different stages of life we're doing everything that we can to tackle inequalities and address fairness, despite all of the economic headwinds that we face for school-aged children, young adults, families and older adults. And it may not all be solved in a single year, and no set of measures will be perfect, but I strongly believe that this is the right start for us, and I commend the budget report to all of you.
Great. Thank you, Johnny. That's a great introduction. So questions, comments? Everything I want to say probably summed up, Johnny, but
So with my housing hat on, and obviously I will be talking about the HRA budget in the next paper, but the aspect of housing that comes in the general fund obviously relates primarily to temporary accommodation. And I note on page 145, 10.3, it's very alarming first sentence. Yeah. Supporting households in temporary accommodation is currently one of the council's biggest financial risks. Yeah. And we're very mindful of this in housing. I know obviously we've got housing officers here, and we are working on this. But from a financial point of view, I'd just like to find out a little bit more about how we are making sure we have eyes wide open on this risk. And just to remind everybody, it's because not so much that the numbers in TA are rising, they haven't risen dramatically. There's still over 2,000 households in TA, and we haven't had a huge increase, a small increase, but it's because so many people are leaving the private rental sector that we're having to put a lot of our families and individuals in hotels, which is not a good outcome for anybody. So that's why we have the increase. So just how are we making sure that we do actually have budget for this?
So I think that the main thing is that we have sufficient contingency built in to the budget to cover that. If we need more during the next financial year than we are actually putting in the base budget for TA. Obviously, the main effort is to try and get the cost, drive the cost down and the spend on TA down. But if we're unsuccessful in doing that, we have got sufficient contingency to cover that.
Thank
I know, I know that we are significantly overspent, obviously, on TA, but it is considerably less than a number of other authorities. So we are aware that it is a very big risk.
Thank you. And just again on that, and I know that the team, if Dan would want to come in here, that our prevention rates are in Q2, they're the best in London. So we are very much working on that. And as we have lots of other interventions, we're working with a company called The Bridge to try to find solutions for families who want to move, and actually often well outside London. So we are looking at all sorts of trying to kind of, really do so, I think, as well.
Can I ask you something? Is the increase just because, the private rental market has fallen by 41% in London? Does that mean that the existing private rental sector we need to put more money into? I mean, sorry, pay the higher rates, or is it literally that we therefore can't go to private rental centre and the additional money we have to spend is the hotels, 120 people in hotels?
It's a slight combination too. So where we have people in private rented properties, often the landlords are saying, costs have gone up, so you've got to pay us more.
Yeah.
And then actually we're also finding some are just selling, they're just saying, I'm sorry, you need to find somewhere else to find tenants. The cost to us, I don't know, Dan wants to add to this, but so the cost to us means,
So additional rent to existing private rental and hotel accommodation for those who can't get private rental. Yeah, thank you. Lincoln.
As always, two things from me. So firstly, I really wanted to thank officers and Annika, who's not here, for all the work they've done on sort of really getting to grips with our capital budget. I think, Mary, this has been music to your ears, because I know this was always your big thing. Because with interest rates rising, we absolutely have to be on this, because we can't, just the borrowing costs alone. So I think we're not there, but I think we've made some really good progress, and that is very much in this document. So thank you to everyone for what they've done. And then my other sort of comments, so very comprehensive comments from Johnny, and I know that's just the dress rehearsal for a bigger speech at budget, but I hope he'll draw out when he gets to that not only he mentioned St Helens and Kingsbridge, and also Lots Road, but of course there's Max Center as well, which is already in the budget. So
that's very important.
And I think they're it's very early days, and Josh and I are working up to have a comprehensive paper. But what we really want to do is try, in the same way we address the school buildings and the quality over a 10-year period. This is a very long-term piece of work. So, and really making sure we have the facilities right for the next 20 years or so. So it's a start. It's just we're looking at it in the round.
And that's really important, because I think our facilities for children are quite good.
We spent a lot of money, and rightly.
A lot of money, and we've got a new school. And because we have a new school, our SEN costs for transport have come down. So it's one of those genuine things where it was spent to save and it worked. But I think it's true to say for adults with disabilities, we're not there yet, and it does have to be something that we concentrate on.
But it's the same principle. They won't have to travel close to them.
Exactly, close to their families. And we're quite short of supported housing.
Absolutely, all of that.
I have to say, I really welcome that. Sorry, Kim.
So just to say, we have a resident in the room today, so it gives me a trader from Portobello Road, so it gives me an opportunity to say I very much welcome the £3.2 billion we're going to be spending on Portobello Road in terms of our amazing spaces. I'm a great fan of the market. I'm a great fan of the areas and the traders that we have here. So thank you. I'm glad to see that that's provided. And I want to thank all the residents, businesses, and traders who contributed to the consultation that we're now having in terms of how we're going to spend the money. So thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to draw attention, although what Emma's fantastically said about our future capital investment in adult social care, there are challenges for adult social care coming forward, and that is the reduction of the ICB budget from 30 to 40%. We've got the outcome of the Gordon Hospital consultation coming, which can have a huge impact on our borough, which could also have cost implications on our own selves as well. the review of the Better Care Fund that also the ICB is doing, which also may have an impact on the adult social care as well. So it's a really tough market out there in terms of where we are in caring for most vulnerable people. I'm really pleased that our fantastic officers have done a great job this year in looking at efficiency savings and getting all the support that residents do need on that front. We're spending £76 million this year on adult social care. But overall, future years are still going to be very, very challenging, especially as I said with some of our other health partners, which may be undergoing review that may impact us. So just putting that out there, but we'll work as hard as we can to ensure that has as minimal impact as possible on that.
And I think it's worth just remembering that the quantum is huge, right?
Absolutely.
Now it's social care, £1 million.
That's right.
And
Huge
even
number.
then, the clean up was quite sufficient work.
Exactly.
We hope it will be, and I'm sure you've touched it very
Yeah.
heavily, but you know, there's a huge pressure. Thank
Riding
you.
you and you.
Jen,
Thank you, and thank you, Johnny. I think that was a great opener. It's always every year when we get the budget, it's a chance to reflect on just how much work is going on within the council. You see line after line of projects that are being delivered. You see investments into adult social care, etc., and into children's. Some of the things that I've been working on, to talk about myself a little bit, are really
important.
about trying to make sure that even in the sort of changing environment that we have out there with a lot more fast food and retail and a lot more sort of coffee cups, we are maintaining our clean streets. We want to make sure that they are kept up to a very high standard. We know our residents expect that of this council, but we're also sort of building on what Johnny started with our Amazing Spaces. We have a number of projects coming forward. Kim mentioned Portobello, but we've just broken ground on Hollywood Road. We've got Bute Street coming up to completion, and then we have new ones starting this summer in Hogarth Road and Kensington Park Road. So even in a challenging environment, we are still making sure that we are improving our areas. But I think over the years ahead, we have to also think a little bit laterally around how we sort of derive income from our fees and charges. We obviously have a sort of a nudge tactic on things like our emissions-based charging for parking. But actually, there's other things we've launched this year, fast track planning to try and speed up the process, but also make some money from that process, understanding that we do need the revenue. And I think there's probably a lot more suggestions like that we could look to implement over the years ahead to really think slightly more laterally about how the council can derive some income. I think there was a working group on commercialisation, and it'd be interesting to know whether we could sort of continue that to make sure that we are looking at what's going on out there, what other boroughs are doing, or indeed what other businesses are doing, to see if we could sort of put a bit of a line item there to see what we could derive. That's a bit of a challenge to officers to see.
can I say that whatever government's coming, you can see from, we've got additional money. Thank you very much, government, for adult social care, etc. this year. I noted that Angela Rayner said that you should the Labour Party get in, or the Conservative Party get in, there will be no more money for local government. So I think what Jen's saying is absolutely opposite. That we need to just think out of the box and see where we can get additional income from in a way which is too risky. And I'm thinking of those councils who really went for commercial, who thought they were big commercial minded and ended up going bust. We don't want to go that far, but we would like to just see if there's imagined things that we could do which are safe at the same time. So I have to say I commend Jim's approach. And I'd like to say it is amazing, the Amazing Spaces. Deep Street going to be great. Certainly in our ward, Chelsea Green's fabulous. I'm looking forward to seeing Gloucester Road because it does need toughing up. It is quite a disgrace at the moment, so hooray. So there are lots of things we can do. I know it's a huge amount of work, but having beautiful public ground that people can enjoy and clean, decent public ground, all of our residents like that. So thank you. Sarah.
I just really wanted to highlight something on the Grenfell recovery. I think there's a nervousness in the community at the moment. Obviously, the recovery programme is coming to an end in March. Some parts of it are continuing until September. So yesterday we did take a scrutiny about the Grenfell Projects Fund, the Community Leadership Programme, and the Curve Legacy Fund, because there is a concern that that's just going to disappear. Really, just sure that everybody is clear that that is going to happen. The money is not lost.
So we're consulting about it. at the moment. Emma,
No, just think a point.
are there any,
Can I
Mary?
just come in with a late comment? Just
Yes.
to note that the committee noted the increased engagement public with the public consultation on the budget, and we're very pleased about that, but also suggested that as a working group, we thought we could have slightly more detailed papers addressing the growth items and the reductions, and actually that those papers might in turn be quite a good method of engaging the public better if we were to put them on the website. Just a thought for the future and next year to try and build on the improved engagement of the public. I think it's very important.
Yeah, good idea. I think that sounds very sensible. We can certainly consider it. Obviously, we're going to right?
Oh, I just wanted to mention the changes that happened in the settlement and have happened since the budget was produced. Just briefly, I mean, you alluded to one. Obviously, we did receive an additional 1.805 million of funding for social care. We expected 1.8 and we got 1.805. That was yesterday. The assessment came out, and so that will be the plan for that is to hold it in a ring fence social care contingency reserve because it's late in the day, and then work out. We do have to spend it on social care, so that's seems the best way to treat that. But we may have pressures that have been alluded to that will help with, or otherwise we will be able to do something else with it. So there's no impact on the budget gap. That's just in a reserve. We've also got £32,000 more of services grant, which will come
Every little helps.
the final paper. And one thing outside the settlement, the HRA programme Carbon Zero, that slips. Sorry about that, because we've talked about slippage, but that slips into 24-25, which will lead to some minor amendments in the paper in Appendix C, the HRA report, and also the Treasury report. Just the borrowing limits will change for that.
Thank you. I think we really welcome the fact that the government has listened to councils who are saying that, the pressure on adult social care really has been immense. And although we've been a very competent council, so we have been able to balance the budget, I think we really welcome having some money there because we don't know exactly what's going to happen next year, and there are huge pressures in adult social care. So I would say we really welcome the government listening to what councils had to say and just putting some more money there. In our case, just in case we need it, and it's good that it's ring fence for that purpose. We're going to go through this at the council meeting in not many weeks' time. So I think, if there aren't any other questions, then we look at the recommendation in paragraph 2 of page, basically all of page 131 and most of 132. We read those?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We move to the next page, please. Which is the housing revenue account, and this is where I'm saying, please, could you know the supplementary paper? I have one supplementary paper. Can we put this in the list first? It's a summary of the Housing or Community Select Committee scrutiny of housing revenue account. So it's their thoughts. And we've got some formal recommendations. And basically, the formal recommendation is that the timing of scrutiny of the HR budget should be brought in line with other business areas of council. That seems totally sensible. And that the support for the local community affected by Grenfell, in addition to the Grenfell survivors, will be listed as a priority. So I think both those need to be eminently sensible suggestions. We all agree. Agreed. Okay, so we agreed the additional paper, and now can we look at the main paper, please?
Thank you. Yes, this light domain budget has been quite challenging to set with the same pressures, but I'd really like to thank the officers for this, and particularly Archer and Lisa and Doug and Dan. Thank you so much. And a lot of this was done in early January, and I note what the scrutiny committee says about the timing of this, but we didn't actually get the rent settlement agreement from government until I believe January the 4th or something. So it's been quite a scramble. And obviously we've been up against inflation. So not only has that caused significant cost to our capital work programme, the rise in all the costs there, but also the cost of borrowing money is, as we all know, significantly higher. And our capital works programme has swelled from 400 million to 600 million. So it's been a challenging budget to do, but we really are committed to that capital works programme, because we obviously know, well, we have heard over many years from all our tenants that we absolutely need to improve our housing and our homes. You know, so we're looking at double glazing, insulation, and decent kitchens and bathrooms, which is we really think a key decisions just coming up for 24 million on that. So all of these are costs. And another pressure also the HRA is particularly working under is we're working in a very new regulatory environment with two new acts, both of which we really do welcome, but it will add increased costs, particularly management costs. And one of the main decisions in the report you will see is to raise rents. And this has been a very difficult decision to make, and one we absolutely do not take lightly. We understand all the cost pressures that everyone's under, and the report earlier this evening, which Joe and Johnny talked about as well, we're very mindful of. And so we've thought long and hard about the different options about this. And so therefore we're putting in place a £500,000 tenancy support fund. And this is an increase from the fund we had last year. And not every council is doing this, but we think it's absolutely the right thing to do and to help our residents. And I'm sure Doug will answer any questions about how that's actually going to be administered, because we've thought long and hard about how that's going to really help. Because we're mindful that a lot of our tenants, about 2/3 of our tenants, receive some form of housing benefit or universal credit, and they will be protected to some extent because the benefits are also going up. So the benefits going up by about 6.7%. And finally, about the rent, we're not alone in raising this. Most other, in fact, all other London boroughs, I believe, to date are raising it. Yeah. So all our neighbours like Hampstead and Fulham, Camden, Islington, Brent, Wandsworth. So that's the rent. And then another aspect of this, we're looking at disposals of some of our standalone property throughout the whole borough, because they are very expensive to maintain. So when they become vacant, it'll be on a case-by-case basis. So I'm pleased. Any questions about this? Do you ask?
Sarah. Doug. Sorry, that soft dropped you in it there. Could you perhaps explain to us how the tenant support fund works?
So at the moment, it's really about tenancy sustainability. So for us, what's really important is to make sure that our residents can stay in the property that rent. So what happens is that we communicate with our residents, and if they need support, we will sit with them in a very bespoke fashion, because it's about the individual, what the individual needs to be able to sustain that tenancy. So that's right. So we've got tenancy support officer or welfare advisors, sort of job title, that will work with our residents and then ensure that there's the appropriate amount. But also we have visiting officers that are out there. So if they find people who are responding to the communications that we're sending, then we can have that support as well and direct them to the tenancy support. We are going to do a lot more comms this year. That's going to be the main change, just to make sure that people know that they definitely know that it's there. Because that last year we pretty well spent what we don't think, not quite, but we think we will. But we've learned that actually we could tailor those messages a lot better. So I think that's the learning.
Kim?
But just on the heating charges, so just looking at your appendix A. So obviously last year there was a massive on cost for heating charges, which are impacted very much on our residents. But I noticed your recharge is fairly static year on year, so you're proposing to do any extra hike in utility costs as far as tenants are concerned or not?
No, we think there will be we're just finalising it. As you know, the way that the heating is purchased means that you're buying it throughout the year. So what we make is the best estimate. So it's likely to go down between 10.
And that's reflected in your budget anyway, because I think you're just budgeting, well, it looks like it's the same cost as last year, so it actually might be a bit of a.
When we wrote this, it's difficult to understand.
Yeah, okay.
The volatility in the heat in this market has made it very difficult to predict. So we earlier in the year we thought it actually might not go down.
Thank you.
Jim?
Just a question on page 383, this was the appendix of the account. On management costs, we sort of budgeted 17.7 million, and it's come in at the moment at 16 million. We're then assuming it goes back up to 17. So I was just wondering what led to that quite large variance.
So there's a reduction in the amount that we contribute to.
Yeah, right.
Which has enabled that, and obviously we've done that to put into the capital program.
Easy answer.
You just like say the capital program is very ambitious, when one looks at the amount of money that you'll be spending.
Yes, we've got.
Over the next 3 years. You know, by 2028, 460 million pounds.
So we're on site at Silchester now, which is good to hear. So as we know, that's going to be $2 million in itself. We're on site on parts of Lancaster West, and there's other tenders going out. That's another considerable. We signed up kitchens and bathrooms. That's another chance. So there are things that are going on that are in train now. That's why it's important that it's a very difficult train to stop. So to being able to fund that is very important. The new framework, which was approved last July, here is now up and running. The ability to deliver that is we think going to be. I mean, dependent on contractors and everything else, but we think that we will make quite. It's ambitious, but we think we can make it.
Yeah, I think we all welcome that. It is an ambitious program, but it's absolutely necessary.
It's worth adding that throughout the process of drafting this business plan, Doug and the team have been, and Councillor McVeigh have been talking to the Tenants Consultant Committee involving the decisions, because these trade-offs that Councillor McVeigh described, they're balancing the importance of maintaining the investment programme against the very difficult decisions, both to put the rent up by the full amount and the decisions to go ahead with these disposals. Clear consensus feedback we had through the TCC was that the most important thing to them was that we keep going the investment, if you see what I mean. So it's kind of that steer that we had from them to inform some of the recommendations we're making here on rents and disposals, because maintaining the integrity of the programme that you've described has emerged as really top priority for them.
Yes, and very important, because actually the stock wasn't up to standard in any way. So it's really, really important that we renovate and make people's homes decent. Huge paper, there's so many implications. And I know everyone's read it very carefully, and it's very well written. So maybe there aren't questions because you've answered them all within the paper. And let me just check before we go to recommendations. And Mary, is there anything you'd like to add?
Scrutiny junkie that you know I am, I wasn't able to attend this meeting, but you've got a report of it, and that was because it clashed with another scrutiny meeting. Which brings me to the one point I would like to make, which is that the reason it clashed is that because the paper was so late.
Yes.
We had been promised it back in sort of at the end of last year, and it slipped and slipped and slipped. So that happened this year. I think the committee was really keen that we try to make sure that doesn't happen again. And that if it does, we get lots of warning that it's going to happen, and that we just have a little bit more transparency about the process. Ideally, it would be in the same timing as the main thing. If that can't happen, we need to know in advance, and we need to know why. So that's really the only point.
And that was in the paper from the housing. Just saying, please could we bring it in line with other business areas, and it should be in early December.
And I'm going to sit down. I promised in that meeting that we'd sit down with the school officers and plot that out now, so we know exactly what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And it may well be that by bringing that scrutiny forward,
there'll be some kind of subject tos there because of some of those separate events
we can
aren't
get it on
confirmed
January
until.
4th,
But nevertheless, you can still have a meaningful conversation subject to those points, so we can definitely.
and one of the things is, well, the current rent settlement formula, this is the last year of it. So depending on what the government decides to do, you know, as soon as we know, we will do the budget, but there may be gaps in it, subject to determine if they don't let us know what they're going to do.
No, but I think it's subject to, and so, you know, so everyone's on the same page and then you can bring bits in completely. Okay, thank you. Can we agree all the recommendations to please and back up to?
Agreed.
Thank you. And now, it's the front strategy, hopefully not front.
Oh, we don't make the weather.
We don't make the weather, no.
It's really exciting.
Right. Please. Ethan?
Thank you. So before us, we have the updated flood risk management strategy. It's a statutory document, but I wanted to start really by thanking James for not only dealing with the post 2021 floods that we had in Kensington, but actually also pulling together this strategy. But actually, so much of it is here because of the conversations we've been having with our residents and understanding from them the pitfalls of dealing with Thames water, the issues we have where some homes have non-returnabouts and others don't, but also putting forward a number of actions that the council will be taking forward, not just because we have a duty to, but because actually we're keen to tackle climate change, and flooding is one of those elements that is exacerbated by the changing climate. Some of the real things that I'm taking away from the strategy are around awareness. There's a number of residents that potentially don't know that they're in a flood risk area. And I see on pages, I find the page, I just had it. The action, here it is, 445, the action plan for Cottinger householder guide on flood resilience, to let people know some of the simple, perhaps some of the more expensive actions that they can take to protect their homes. But it's also on the council to make sure that we're resilient, so that if and when there is a flood, that we're ready to respond as quickly as possible. We saw with Portobello Road that it became a river in 2021. And as Kim mentioned, we're putting in money now ourselves to make sure that we're building in some of that infrastructure. I think it's also a bit of a lesson that we relied on Victorian infrastructure probably for too long in central London. And actually, it's not just on the council, but it's on Thames Water and other statutory authorities to enhance the service that they're offering our residents. We're seeing down in Chelsea that Thames Tideway super sewer is going in. But the stark lesson I learned from the flood experts was that the amount of water that landed in Kensington the night of the day of the floods would require 8 of those super sewers to absorb that amount of water. So 8 capacity super sewers to take what landed in one day. So the infrastructure requirement for London is vast. Kensington and Chelsea sits on the surface water flooding group for London councils, and James is helping there to make sure that we are working pan-London, because the clouds don't particularly pay much notice of our borough boundaries, to make sure that where interventions are necessary across borough, we can help pull Thames Water and Ofwat to the table to make sure that they're delivered. A lot for me there, James. I don't know if there's more you'd like to add, but it is a very good strategy.
Yeah, thank you. As Jen mentioned, it's a statutory document the council has to maintain. And actually, it's a culmination of all of the investigations into the flooding in July 2021 that affected many residents. All of the scrutiny that went on with the Environment Select Committee and the working group. So the combination of all of that engagement led to this strategy. So there are 4 main themes within the strategy. The first is flood resilient communities, making sure that communities are more aware, better prepared, and more able to recover from flooding. Second theme is adaptive places, making sure that the spaces around us can cope with what's happening now, but also into the future. The third is around working together, as Councillor Cumon mentioned. It's really important that we pull together with organisations, with other organisations, other boroughs, as well as internally, to make sure that everything's working as it should do. And the fourth is around monitoring and review. So there are 12 objectives, but there's an extensive action plan that accompanies the strategy, and the action plan will be reviewed annually, progress against that, and that'll go to the Environment Select Committee as well. So there'll be a continual scrutiny of progress over the 6 years of the strategy. So it's not just do a document now and forget about it. It will be continued and looked at. Yeah, I think that's it.
Question.
On page 418, they talk about SUDS. I've read it carefully. I just wanted to draw attention to some of the good work that's happening across the borough and invite comments from director, lead member. I'm sure we all in this room are delighted to see the progress of the Napier Road sustainable drainage scheme. It's a resident-led scheme. I'm certainly very supportive, as are the ward councillors, and I guess a commitment that we're going to take forward such schemes, and also that we'll look proactively for opportunities for resident-led ideas about how we can improve flood resilience, particularly in wards that were affected in 2021. Exactly, and it's about, particularly with sustainable drainage, it's about taking the opportunities where we can within existing capital programmes or identifying individual schemes. So the scheme in Napier Road was proposed for tree pits within the highway, but actually there's significant risk of flooding in that general area, and there's the potential to put in sustainable drainage below ground while the tree pits are going in at the same time. So it's a really good example of taking those opportunities where we can, as well as identifying a programme of interventions where they can go in.
But the key thing is that we're committed to kind of interventions, where we're capital, but that we design alongside residents and that we're practical and suitable for the local area. There's no concerns on that regard.
Personally, what's a flush threshold for planting beds? So page 447, it says flush thresholds of planting beds at Kelsey Green. Is that just
Oh, yes, yeah, so it means that there's no curve, it's not holding it in, so basically the water from those invulnerable areas can just go into the plant.
And you don't have to make it slope so it goes into.
It goes through, yeah, so it's basically you're not separating where the hard spaces are from the soft bed, so it's not raised, and it's kind of integrated within the plant.
So the whole thing really is trying to slow everything down, isn't it? So it doesn't go down like a river down your street, that it gives more chance for everything to get into the sewers, and the sewers go into the sea.
Yeah, because at the moment, the water, all the rainfall, all goes into the sewer network.
Yeah.
Basically, as quickly as possible. So sustainable drainage is about intercepting that and dealing with water before it gets into the sewer network, so that there is capacity. So because the flood events, the water comes quickly and it goes away relatively quickly, but the impact for residents stays for months.
Yes.
So it's just about when there is time within the sewer network to take more water, it's then releasing the water into the sewer at that time. So it might be only a matter of hours, but then there is capacity to take water.
Kim,
Sorry.
I spoke to you.
Yeah, I was going to say this might be a bit of ignorance, but I remember having, when we had the 21 floods, there were all sorts of debates about who's responsible for which. You know, if the pipes there, is it the resident, is it Thames Water, or is it the council? I mean, do we have a sort of fairly clear, that's just two parts of my question, a clear demarcation that people understand what they're going to do and what we're going to do? And then the last bit is, I think it's down to the point that Jem was talking about communicating to people. I mean, I know somebody who lives on Holland Road, who moved in 2010. Obviously, had seen this report. He would see the 56 flood, 58 flood, 60 flood, 2004 flood, 2005 flood, 2007 flood. And he's only just moving back in now after the last one, 2017. So I don't know what's going to happen with him and the repairs or dealing with the issues of that. But I think, you know, if somebody moving in or renting a flat, you could say from the searches that you'll be able to identify it. But if you're renting a flat, you want to know it. And you know, to have 3 foot of sewage in your flat,
Not great.
It's not great.
Yes, and so on the point around awareness raising, I think it's really important, particularly when there are, as you say, there may be a couple of years in between the flood events, and there may be, you know, changes within the areas within those properties, and there may be the awareness of flood risk immediately after a flood. It does wane. I think it's important to note, and the mapping in the report shows it, that the distribution of flood risk is not uniform across the borough, and of particular note is the areas of high deprivation, higher amounts of social housing and registered providers of housing are the areas that there's a higher risk. So there may be a higher turnover in rental properties in those areas. So therefore it makes it even more important to make sure that the awareness is not just a one-off and then goes away, particularly in those areas.
And we're committed to doing some targeted communications. There's also an annual review of the action plan, and as it's required, we do it on an ongoing basis and actually scrutinised. And that was recognised.
And sorry, quick supplement. And the prospect of the new big developments in Earls Court or North Kensington, I mean, there is consideration as to, you know, as on its route to the river, as to who it might impact on.
Yes, yeah. So all of those developments. So I form the role of the Legal Flood Authority for the council, and all those developments are scrutinised in terms of drainage and wastewater impact. So actually, there may be a benefit because there's existing development, existing impermeable area in those sites. That actually development in those areas may result in a benefit overall to particularly peak flood risk.
So that will be drawn out in the application, and the impact of any development will be understood in the second part of the package.
Right, thank you.
Any other comments, Mary? Do you want to
No, just a good example of scrutiny being really involved in some policy development. So thank you for everybody and for all the support they gave the scrutiny working within that process.
Thank you. Could we agree to adopt the local flood risk management strategy as set out in Appendix 1? And just simply filling it actually down to that strategy, which is in Appendix 2. Agreed. Thank you. Now, from this time on, I don't believe it's any other business. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next